Halloween is just one of those holidays that I think is just so much fun to celebrate, especially because I have kids. And today I'm excited because I am bringing you some of my absolute favorite Halloween DIYs. I have some of my old Halloween DIYs and some new ones all together in one place, and these are all Dollar Tree Halloween easy DIYs that I'm sharing with you. Hi and welcome if you are new. My name is Jennifer and this is a little bit of Common Crazy. If you like what you see here today, I hope you will hit that subscribe button. Now let's jump right on into the projects. For this project, I am using a couple of these boxes from Dollar Tree. They happen to already be black, so I'm going to leave them this way. I'm also using some paper that I picked up at Hobby Lobby, but you may already have some in your stash. I'm also using these black stickers that I grabbed from Dollar Tree as well. To start off with, I measured the inside of my boxes, and that gave me the measurement that I needed to cut out my foam board. Once I had my foam board measured and cut out, I went in with some Mod Podge on top of the foam board, placed my scrapbook paper on top of that, and then trimmed that out with some scissors. I used the stickers to spell Eek on one of them and Boo on the other, and then I placed the foam board sheets inside of the boxes. Once I did that, I realized that they weren't popping as much as I wanted to, so I went in with a white gel pen and traced out the letters, and that was exactly what they needed. Such a simple and easy project. For this project, I made the easiest garland using the wood pumpkin and ghost ornaments from Dollar Tree. I'm also using some Waverly white chalk paint and then some orange paint. Now again, I use what paint I have on hand. Use what paint you have. It doesn't really matter. As you can tell, this bottle is a little bit crusty. I added water to my paint because I really wanted it to be more like a stain. Once I had the consistency that I wanted it, I brushed it on with a thin brush on all of my pumpkins, the front and the back. I should say on the orange went on the pumpkins, and then I wiped off the excess. I did the exact same thing with the white onto the ghost. After that, I took some of the Waverly wax and antique. I thinned it out with water as well, and then I went in with a tiny brush and I outlined all of the eyes and the mouths of the ghost first, and then I went in on a brush, dabbed out the excess, and went on top of all of the pumpkins and the ghost just to add another layer of depth and dimension with the wax. I absolutely love the way that these turned out. In order to hang these, I'm actually using the string that they come with. I'm just looping them through, tying a knot, and then I took some string from the Dollar Tree, some twine, and then just threaded those through the twine or onto the twine by alternating them. Once I was done, I absolutely love this, but I decided that I wanted to do a stacking kind of thing, so I went ahead and made a banner to go along with this. Grabbed a book from the Dollar Tree and my Fiskars craft knife and a ruler, and I just cut out the pages I need. I'm actually going to be spelling out the word Halloween, so I needed 9 pages. Once I had all my pages cut out, I did trim around each of the sides so that I only had the words showing. After that, I went and I found a couple inches up from the bottom in the middle section. I put a little circle-y dot thing, and then I measured from the corner to that dot, from each bottom corner to that dot, in order to create a triangle, again using my craft knife to cut that out and make little dovetail ends of my banner. After that, I went ahead and did 2 holes on the top so that I would be able to hang the banner at the end. After that, I went ahead and placed 1 letter per sheet in order to spell out the word Halloween. I used the lines from the page to help me keep my letters nice and straight, using the previous page to know exactly where I needed to put the next letter. And hopefully that is making sense. Now, I did get some comments last year when I did this about reinforcing the page. I didn't reinforce mine. It was fine last year. It's fine this year. But if you are concerned, by all means, go ahead and reinforce it, especially the back side of it. I did thread this coming in from the back around to the front and then back to the back with using some twine in order to hang this. Also, I hung this on my fireplace mantle. It's Texas. We don't light our fires in October, but if you live in a place where you might do that, then you could always hang this on a mirror or some other non-flammable area in your home. For my little spooky jars, I'm using these glass jars and black sand. I just poured the black sand straight into the jars. I used a funnel so I wouldn't make a big mess. After that, I went in with some sandpaper to scratch up the jars to kind of make it look like the jars have been old and beat around and maybe like tossed up by some rocks or something. And then I used some wax and antique. This is from Waverly, but you can even use some paint. Just water it down, wipe it on, brush it on, wipe it off, because you just want it to get kind of stuck in those cracks. Then I had found some free printables, and you can choose the ones that you want. I did shrink them down a little bit so they would fit on the jars better. Cut them out, Mod Podged them on, and I set them aside. I let them dry. Once they were dried, I went back in with the Waverly Wax and Antique and a tiny little fluffy brush, just like a cheap little one, and I just waxed around the edges, just distressing a little ever so slightly to age them up. I did not want these to look new. I definitely wanted them to have that well worn in look. I finished by adding a thin coat of Mod Podge on top of each of the labels, and then these were done, and I love the way that they turned out. This may be one of my absolute favorite garlands that I have ever made, and I am so excited to hang it again this year. So using some black paint, I just painted the witch's hat as well as some smaller dowel rods. After that, I do have these stickers from the Dollar Tree that I'm putting on the witch's hat. If you can't find these, you could also use like the lace and paint it black and hot glue that on. You could use some scrapbook paper. It doesn't really have to be this, or you don't have to honestly have anything at all. Once I was done with that, I did go in with a gel pen to outline that just to have it pop a little bit more. I also used some Mod Podge on top of it just to make sure that the stickers would stay down and not like curl and pop up later on. And because I don't like to have Mod Podge lines, I just went ahead and Mod Podged the entire hat. To make my broom, I took some raffia, about 3 to 4 strands of raffia, and I wrapped it around my fingers. This is kind of like if you're making a tassel. So I'm wrapping it around my fingers. Once I have it to the thickness that I want, I took my raffia, I split it in half, I got a dowel, added hot glue, and stuck it right into that center where I had split it. That's the first way it holds. Then I took another piece of raffia, and then I wrapped it around and tied it into the knot, and that's the second place that it holds. Then I could trim the bottom and trim it to the size that I want it to be for the room. It was as simple as that. To hang it on to my garland, I just took some twine, I wrapped it around. I did go in with just a tiny bit of hot glue to make sure that it would stay secure before I tied it into a knot. And then that was it. After that, I took the twine that the hats came in, I looped those through, tied those into a knot, and then I alternated these on a piece of twine, and then I have a little broom and hat garland that I love. For this project, I'm going to be using the back of this sign. So just grab any sign that you may already have lying around. I did fill in the holes, so once that dried, I sanded that, and I'm painting it with Waverly's chalk paint in white. Again, just go in with your favorite paint. After that dried, I'm using a Sharpie and a ruler in order to draw out my faux shiplap lines. Once I got those on there, I like to soften them up by just sanding them with a 220 grit sandpaper. Then I went in with a witch's hat and some black paint. I painted that. So I put the hat aside to let it dry, and then I printed off this little printout. It's a free printout that I made for you. I will link that down in the description box for you. After that, I cut it out into individual sections, and then I took a pencil to the back of it and I'm scribbling. This is a great alternative for anyone that doesn't have a Cricut. All you're gonna do is scribble on each part, and then you're gonna attach it where you want them on your sign. As you can see, I used washi tape in order to hold them in place and to keep them still. After that, I went in with the same pencil and I traced over the letters in order to get that pencil on the back side of the papers to transfer onto the sign itself. When you remove the paper, then you can just see the lightest transfer of the pencil remaining. And all you're gonna do is take a Sharpie and you're gonna go over those pencil markings in order to create the sign. After I had gone over all of the writing, in order to soften it just a little bit, I did go back in with a 220 grit sandpaper and just gave it a real light sanding, and then I used some paint and a very dry brush and dry brushed on just ever so slightly a little bit of black paint around the edges just to distress the sign just a little bit. After that, I used some hot glue in order to attach the witch's hat, and then this sign was done by the prickling of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes. Okay, this project is taking you back to when I barely started my channel, and I'm really using what I have. This is some pallet wood and a jack-o'-lantern, of course, from the Dollar Tree. But I've seen this with the pumpkin version, but I love it as a jack-o'-lantern. I am using just some stain and some house paint. Seriously, using what I had. So use what paint you have. Use acrylic paint, use chalk paint. And if you don't have stain, you can, of course, use some like antique wax like I always do. I substitute that for stain all of the time. So to start off with, I am taking my stain. I stained the entire board. After I let that set up, I do go ahead and I lay down the jack-o'-lantern. I put in his face by dabbing the paint into the face section, and then I paint around the edge of the jack-o'-lantern, let it dry, and that's it. That's how simple this sign is. This is the easiest skull beware sign, and I absolutely love it. So let me show you quickly how I did it. So I have this fall Dollar Tree sign that I filled in the holes, and then I set it aside while those were drying, and I took this beware sign, and I'm mixing a couple of paints in order to paint it. I took the Waverly chalk paint in white and ivory, and originally I was doing like a 50-50 combination, and it ended up going back and I did 2/3 of the ivory and just 1/3 of the white. The ivory was just slightly too yellow and I needed to tone it back some. I wanted it to match the color of the skull. I just wanted you to know where my thought process was on that. When I went in, but before I went in to paint the beware, I did go in with a 60 grit sandpaper and I gave it a good sanding in order to help the paint to stick to it better. At first when I was painting it, I was putting it on nice and pretty, and then I decided I don't like that texture. So then I went in with my paintbrush and I pounced it because I really wanted it to have a texture, and I liked that so much better. It took me 3 coats of the paint, and if you look really close, you'd be able to see some areas have a little bit more paint, some areas have a little bit less paint, and I absolutely love that finished detail. Now I got this skull from Walmart. It was under $1, but you could use a jack-o'-lantern that you could get from Dollar Tree if you wanted to. I did fill in the hole, and then I used the same paint in order to help kind of cover up that hole. After that, I went in with Waverly's chalk paint and ink to paint my sign, covering it all the way up, making sure that I did not go over those edges. I wasn't too concerned if some of the brown did poke through. I only did do 1 layer of the black over the entire sign. Once the paint dried, I went in with some hot glue in order to attach both the skull and the beware to the sign, and then this project was done, and I love it, even though it is the spookiest Halloween sign that I have. This is such an easy project, and it will only take a few minutes to put it together. To start off with, I just removed the raffia bows from each of these little wooden pumpkins, and then I want to get the glitter off, and someone in the comments suggested that I rub the pumpkins together or anything glittery against glittery and it will get it off. And let me tell you, it did a pretty good job, but there was still a little bit left, and so I went in with some Goo Gone. Thanks again, Courtney. I put the Goo Gone on and I wiped it off. Actually, it leaves a residue, so I do go in with some rubbing alcohol in order to wipe off that residue. I don't know if it really matters, but I just worry that the paint won't stick as well, so that's what I do. Paint the pumpkin stem and all in Waverly's chalk paint and ink. It just needs 1 coat, and a little bit of that orange pops through. I'm not concerned because I kind of like it. For the skeleton, I went ahead and I took a 60 grit sandpaper and I sanded any of the little rough spots that he may have and picked off any random little pieces of plastic that would not be necessary for him to have as well. The skeleton comes pretty stiff in his limbs, so I went ahead and bent him at his shoulder, elbows, and knees. Now, he didn't break, but you do want to be careful because he's plastic and he could snap. But I did want to give him a little bit more movement. Now, at the elbows, it's really hard to get him to stay, so I did go in with some pliers, and I did the same thing at his knees. I don't advise doing that at his shoulders. I think he could lose an arm, and I don't think you want an armless skeleton. To help him pop a little bit more on the black, I decided I wanted to go ahead and paint him white, so I just took him outside to my little spray tent and gave him a good coat of white paint. On one of the pumpkins, I'm using this stencil that I got from Dollar Tree in a stencil brush, and I've dabbed off my brush, and it's almost dry. And I'm taking it in and I'm just gonna pounce it straight down. And I love that this boo is spelled with bones. I thought that was perfect to go along with the skeleton. I taped this down just to protect me from not getting anything else other than the boo and to keep it in place while I was stenciling. After I'm done stenciling, I go ahead and I pull the stencil off and the tape off. I do end up having a little bit of my paint peeled as well. I'm okay with that. I didn't mind that the orange was poking through, like I said earlier. I think it totally fits with the Halloween vibe. To get the skeleton on the pumpkin, all I did was use my stapler and one single staple right across his spine, and I lost that footage, but you can see exactly where I put that staple, and then I used some Waverly chalk paint and white to paint that staple in order to hide it a little bit better. I just think that this was such a fun idea and so many different possibilities and where I can use them while I am decorating for Halloween. This is another fun little project, also using those little wooden pumpkins from Dollar Tree. To start off with, I removed the bows from the pumpkins and then the glitter. I tried the rubbing together technique, and then I went in with some Goo Gone and some alcohol to remove that residue. Because these were already black, I just went in with some of the Waverly chalk paint and ink, and I just painted the stem and the side that had the glitter on each of the pumpkins. While I had that out, I went ahead and grabbed the witch's hat. I filled in the hole, let that dry, sanded it down, and I painted that black as well. When my pumpkins were dry, I went in with a thin layer of Mod Podge on the pumpkin part and some scrapbook paper that I had left over from a previous project. I did get it from Hobby Lobby. I always get it for $1, but you may already have some in your stash that you like to use instead. And I cut them down so that they would be just slightly larger than each of the pumpkins. I laid it down onto the pumpkin and then used my hand to press them in. Now you will see that I really like to use the palm of my hand, and I press to the point that you can see the edges of the pumpkin through the paper. This really helps so you don't get any of that wrinkling, bubbling effect that nobody wants to see when they are using Mod Podge. Once the Mod Podge dries, wait till it dries, then I like to go ahead and sand off the extra edges. That's how you get a clean, crisp edge. If you've been around, you know that this is my favorite way to do it. If you prefer to flip it over and go in with a craft knife, by all means, everyone has their preference. You do what is most comfortable for you. This is just my way of doing things. So on one of the pumpkins, I am just grabbing the 3-in-1 stickers that I have here from Dollar Tree and laying that directly onto the pumpkin. After that, I hot glue the witch's hat on top of that. And then on the other pumpkin, I'm going in and I'm stenciling this black crow to the bottom using Waverly's chalk paint and ink. Again, I make sure my brush is almost completely dry. I then go in and I do a dabbing motion and I get a beautiful stencil if I use that technique every time. While working on my Halloween stuff, I noticed that I was missing a black vase. And so all I did was go and grab this clear vase from Dollar Tree and some black spray paint. Took it out to my tent, gave it a good coat of the black spray paint, and now this is a great vase. Not only is it good for Halloween, I can use it at Christmas time, and technically all year it is a great staple just to have. I'm so excited, and it was so easy. Something else that is easy is I also like to elevate and give different heights to my decor, and I didn't have a black crate. And I love these crates from Dollar Tree, and I'm just using some Waverly chalk paint and ink, giving it one good coat inside and out. And now I can use this to either stack things on top of or put things inside of. And again, only took me a couple of minutes to do, and I can use it all year long. I absolutely needed a mat for Halloween. Now I will tell you, after I made this one, I did stop in at Dollar Tree and I saw that they are selling Halloween mats. So if you can find them in store, they're $1, but if you can't, here's a quick and easy one to make. So I started off by taking my stickers and I spelled the trick or treat across the top straight, and I left that alone, and then I was gonna do the same thing with Smell My Feet. And you see that I was putting it on straight. But the nice thing about the stickers is you can move them around, and I decided to go ahead and stagger them instead. I just thought that it added a little bit more fun, and you guys, it's Halloween. Halloween is supposed to be fun. Now, if you don't like the trick or treat Smell My Feet, you could also do, I don't know, Little Monsters Live Here. We like to hide the bones. I don't know, whatever makes you smile and have fun. That's what this is all about. So get your stickers on there with whatever you want, and then you are gonna tape off your mat. You're gonna tape off everything that you do not want to paint. So I framed out the trick or treat area because I wanted to paint out an entire rectangle white. After that, I just took it outside and gave it a good light dusting. I don't think it takes a ton of paint to do this. I've had people tell me they felt like they used a ton of paint. I am using the Rust-Oleum Ultra Matte. It does have like a primer as part of it. I give it a light dusting and I feel like my letters pop up just fine, and I have used this can of paint on a ton of projects. Once it's dried, I go ahead and I remove the stickers. Now, if you want to save the stickers and use it for something else, go ahead and just reattach them to your sheet. Otherwise, you do whatever you want with them. Now, if some of the paint happened to get under, it could, because this mat has texture in it. No worries, all you're gonna do is get your trusty old black Sharpie out and you're gonna color in the lines and fill in anywhere you got white and you didn't want the white. At this point, you could always leave it here and consider it done, but I wanted a couple of orange stripes to really bring in that Halloween feel. So I went ahead and I'm taping off the mat, but only leaving the areas where I wanted to stripe. I wanted one orange stripe at the top and one at the bottom. Now I went ahead and I used contact paper in the center to cover up the trick or treat smell my feet section, just because that was a larger section and it took 2 pieces of the contact paper in order to do that. But you could also use tape for that as well. It's just kind of whatever you have, just cover up what you don't want painted. Once the paint dried, I did go back in with that black Sharpie and clean up anything that I needed to. I absolutely love this mat and I'm so excited to put it out on my front porch. Here are some more non-scary Halloween DIY ideas for you, as well as some fall ideas. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!